Be me. My name's Logan. For the last decade, I've been a technical coordinator at a high-end event company. You've probably seen our work, big product launches, flashy corporate conferences, that sort of thing. My job is simple. I make sure the mountain of electronics, lights, and sound equipment actually works when the big moment comes. I'm the guy in the background with a roll of gaffer tape and a multimeter, the one who makes sure the magic happens on cue. I don't do meetings well. I don't like corporate jargon. I like solid connections, clean power, and gear that does what it's supposed to do, every single time. A few years back, we had this old school manager, a guy who came up from the trenches, just like me. He knew the difference between a DMX cable and an XLR. One time, we were setting up for a massive auto show reveal. The client's CEO was about to walk on stage in front of the world's media. The main projector, a beast that cost more than my house, just died. Black screen. The manager started freaking out, shouting into his headset. Panic stations. I walked over, didn't say a word, popped the service panel, saw it instantly. A single capacitor on the power board was bulging, a 10-cent part. Pulled out my soldering iron from my go bag. 2 minutes later, I had a new one soldered in place. Flipped the switch. The projector whirred to life 30 seconds before the CEO's grand entrance. The manager grabbed my shoulder, said, "I saved his life. He bought me a bottle of very expensive whiskey that Christmas." That was the world I was used to. Competence was king. Results were the only thing that mattered. Then he retired, and then came Ramona. I remember the all-hands meeting where she was introduced. She walked in with this air of absolute certainty, like she'd already read the last page of a book everyone else was still starting. She came from some digital marketing firm, and was now our new head of project innovation, or some other title that sounds important but doesn't actually mean anything. Her introductory speech was a masterclass in buzzwords. She wanted to leverage our core competencies, foster a more inclusive ideation ecosystem, and disrupt the industry paradigms. I saw the other techs, guys I'd worked with for years, just glaze over. We were used to talking about load-in times and power draw, not disrupting paradigms. Right away, this one guy, Brady, latched onto her. Brady was one of our account managers, a guy who could sell water to a drowning man, but couldn't figure out how to plug in a laptop. He was nodding enthusiastically at everything she said, chiming in with, "Absolutely, Ramona," and "That's a fantastic point. We need that forward momentum." The head of our department, Julio, just stood at the back of the room. Julio is a legend. He started out loading trucks 30 years ago. He's seen it all, and he has a built-in detector for nonsense that's second to none. He just watched, arms crossed, with a face like carved stone. He didn't clap when she finished her speech. A few weeks went by. Small projects. Ramona would come in with ideas that sounded amazing in a PowerPoint slide, but were a nightmare in reality. She wanted to use experimental wireless speakers for an outdoor event, not understanding that wireless signals and thousands of people with cell phones don't mix. I'd quietly explain the technical limitations, and she'd look at me with this little smile, like I was a quaint old relic. She'd say things about my feedback coming from a place of traditionalist thinking and how we needed to embrace the challenges of innovation. Then I'd show her the signal interference readings from the last outdoor festival we did, and she'd reluctantly agree to use the reliable wired system. She didn't like being told no, especially by me. I could feel it. She saw me as part of the old guard, a problem to be managed. Brady, on the other hand, became her golden boy. He learned her language. He'd talk about brand storytelling and experiential engagement. He never offered a practical solution, just abstract corporate poetry, and she loved it. Then we landed the big one, the Odyssey project. A new electric car company, flush with cash, wanted the biggest, most insane launch event in history. We're talking a full-on sensory experience. A massive stage with hundreds of moving LED panels, holographic projections of the car assembling itself in midair, all perfectly synced to a custom soundscape. It was the biggest budget we'd ever had, a career-making or career-breaking project, and Ramona was put in charge. The first major planning meeting was in the main boardroom. The whole core team was there. Ramona stood at the head of the table, radiating confidence. Brady sat next to her, laptop open, ready to be her scribe and cheerleader. She laid out the creative vision. It was ambitious, but doable. The real problem was the technology that would tie it all together. The core of the show was the synchronization system. One brain to control every single light, screen, and speaker down to the millisecond. If it failed, the entire show would fall apart into chaos. Ramona clicked to a new slide. It had a sleek, futuristic logo, Sync Nova. She launched into a glowing speech about this new cloud-based control platform. It was the hot new thing from some startup. All style, all sizzle. Their website was full of testimonials from art installations and small-scale gallery exhibits. She explained how it was agile, scalable, and used next-generation AI to manage the workflow. She wanted our entire multi-million-dollar show, the reputation of our company, to run on this thing. I waited patiently for her to finish. The other senior tech looked at me, a worried expression on his face. I cleared my throat. All eyes turned to me. Ramona, I started, keeping my voice calm and even. That system has a critical flaw for an event of this scale. Her smile tightened just a little. Go on, Logan. It's entirely cloud-based, I said. It needs a constant, high-speed, uninterrupted internet connection to a server somewhere on the other side of the country. I pointed to the schematic of the venue. This hall will have 2,000 guests, all with phones searching for Wi-Fi. Media crews will be running their own wireless broadcasts. That's a recipe for signal interference. If the connection drops for even half a second, we lose control of the show. She was about to interrupt, but I kept going. There's no local failsafe, no physical off switch if something goes wrong. We'd be handing the keys to our entire event to a startup server and the local internet provider. I slid a technical spec sheet across the table. I have an alternative, our in-house controller, Cerberus. It's a closed-loop system, entirely hardwired. It's not pretty, it doesn't have a fancy user interface, but it's built like a tank. I looked around at the other techs who were nodding. We used it for the international sporting events. It has triple redundancy and its own dedicated power backup. It has never, ever failed on a show. It's the professional, zero-risk option. There was a moment of silence. I had laid out a clear, logical, experience-based argument. Ramona looked at me, and the patronizing smile was back in full force. "Thank you, Logan," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "I appreciate you bringing that old-school perspective to the table." The way she said old school made it sound like an insult. "But," she continued, standing up and leaning on the table, "we are not in the business of being safe. We are in the business of being spectacular. Cerberus is exactly the kind of rigid masculine thinking that holds back innovation." I just stared at her. Did she really just say that? "This isn't about being masculine," I replied, my voice still level. "It's about mitigating risk." "No," she cut me off, her voice sharp now. "It's about trusting in new technology and dynamic solutions instead of clinging to bulky, outdated hardware. The client wants to see that we are on the cutting edge. They don't want to hear that their futuristic car launch is being run by a black box that looks like it's from the Cold War." Brady jumped in, sensing his moment. "She's absolutely right. The optics of using an old system are all wrong. Sync Nova aligns with the client's brand identity. It's a much more holistic approach." I could feel the argument slipping away. It wasn't about logic anymore. It was about feelings and image. I looked at Julio, hoping he'd step in. He was just watching, his expression unreadable. He gave me a tiny, almost imperceptible shake of his head. He was letting her have the rope. Ramona looked directly at me, a triumphant glint in her eyes. "The decision is made. We will be using Sync Nova. I need everyone to get on board and have a positive can-do attitude. Any more negativity will only hinder the process." The message was clear. Questioning her was negativity. I just leaned back in my chair. Understood. I didn't say another word for the rest of the meeting. There was no point. I had presented the facts, and the facts had been dismissed in favor of a narrative. The weeks that followed were a special kind of hell. Getting Sync Nova to even recognize our equipment was a nightmare. The startup's tech support was just a couple of young guys who were great at coding, but had clearly never been on a real event site. They'd tell us to reboot the router or check our firewall settings, while we were trying to sync 200 moving lights and 50 LED screens. Ramona and Brady would spend hours on video calls with them, talking about troubleshooting the data pipeline and optimizing the cloud interface. Meanwhile, My team and I were in the trenches, dealing with the reality. The system would randomly drop devices. One minute, a bank of speakers would be online. The next, they'd be gone from the network. The timing was off. The video would lag behind the audio by a fraction of a second, just enough to be jarring and unprofessional. Ramona's solution was more meetings, more brainstorming sessions about workflow blockages and communication strategies. She brought in whiteboards and sticky notes. We spent an entire afternoon ideating solutions instead of actually fixing the problem. The technicians were getting more and more frustrated. They started coming to me directly, ignoring the official chain of command. "Logan, the south wall screens won't take the command signal. Logan, the audio server is throwing 100 errors a minute." I'd help them where I could. I taught them workarounds, how to bypass the SyncNova interface for certain diagnostics, how to manually reset gear when the cloud system failed. I was doing my job, keeping the hardware side of things running, but I never touched the SyncNova system itself. That was Ramona's baby. I just quietly documented every single failure, every error code, every dropped connection. I had a logbook thick with evidence. One evening, we were working late. The main holographic projector was refusing to sync. It was a key part of the show's opening sequence. Ramona, Brady, and 2 of the junior techs were gathered around it, looking worried. Ramona was on her phone with SyncNova support, getting more useless advice. I walked over. I'd seen this issue before with laser projectors. "The refresh rate on the signal processor isn't matched to the projector's native input," I said to no one in particular. "You have to go into the master controller's command line and manually set the output frequency. The cloud interface won't let you do it." Ramona lowered her phone. She looked at me with pure annoyance. "Logan, we have the official support team working on this. We don't need random guesswork." "It's not guesswork," I said, pointing at the error log on the laptop. "That code means a frequency mismatch. It's a hardware-level issue." Brady stepped forward. "I think we should trust the experts, Logan. The SyncNova guys know their own system." I just shrugged. "All right." I turned and walked away. I went to the warehouse section of the venue. Sitting on a pallet, covered in a tarp, was the Cerberus control rack. I'd made sure it was brought to the site, officially listed on the manifest as a backup power distribution unit. I spent the next hour quietly checking it over. I powered it up, ran a full diagnostic, and loaded the basic show layout I'd programmed weeks ago, just in case. Everything was green, solid, reliable, and ready to go. It was a beautiful site. I powered it down and covered it back up, my own private insurance policy. The next morning, I heard they finally got the projector working. It took them until 3 a.m. The solution, which they presented as a brilliant breakthrough from the SyncNova team, was to manually set the output frequency through a hidden command line. Ramona never acknowledged that I had given them the exact solution hours earlier. The tension in the building was getting thick enough to cut with a knife. The event was just a few days away. Nothing was working reliably. The team was exhausted and demoralized. Ramona's leadership style had devolved into pure sloganeering. Any complaint was met with, "We need to stay positive." Any technical failure was a learning opportunity that will make the final result stronger. She called a team meeting the day before the final dress rehearsal. We were all gathered, running on fumes and caffeine. She stood before us, trying to project an image of calm control, but I could see the panic in her eyes. She talked about how greatness is born out of struggle, and how she had absolute faith in the team and the technology. It was a speech designed to reassure a nervous client, not a team of exhausted technicians who knew exactly how broken everything was. It felt completely disconnected from our reality. Then came the dress rehearsal. It was supposed to be the first full, uninterrupted run-through of the entire 15-minute show. The client representatives were there, sitting in the empty arena. Julio was there, standing in the shadows at the back. Ramona stood at the main control station, a headset on, trying to look like a mission commander. "All right, everyone, on my mark. Let's make some magic." She gave the cue. "Show start now." The first 30 seconds were flawless. The music swelled, the lights dimmed perfectly. It was breathtaking. I saw a relieved smile spread across Ramona's face. Then it started. A bank of LED panels on the right wall suddenly froze, displaying a corrupted test pattern. The audio desynced, creating a horrible echo effect that bounced around the arena. The holographic car flickered violently, then vanished. From the speakers came a sudden, deafening blast of digital static. It was a total, catastrophic system failure. Ramona was frantically clicking her mouse, her face pale. "Hold! Hold! Stop the sequence!" Brady was speaking urgently into his headset, trying to get answers from a system that had gone completely haywire. The client reps were just sitting there, silent and unimpressed. Julio hadn't moved an inch. They spent the next hour trying to reboot the system. They managed to get it back online. They tried to run the show again. This time, it failed in a completely different way. The lights came on at full blast, blindingly bright, and the audio didn't start at all. After a third failed attempt, the client reps quietly stood up and left without a word. Ramona finally took her headset off. The room was deathly quiet. She turned to the demoralized team. I expected her to admit defeat, to finally concede that the system was a failure. Instead, she straightened her shoulders and forced a bright smile. "Okay, team, this is exactly why we do rehearsals. We found the bugs. The system was just overloaded. A few tweaks to the server allocation, and we'll be golden for tomorrow." She was in complete denial, blaming everything but the fundamental flaw in her chosen technology. She gave us a few more empty words of encouragement and then dismissed us for the night. As I was packing up my gear, I walked past the control station. The main monitor was still on, displaying the Sync Nova error log. It was a cascading stream of red text. Fatal_error, network_handshake_timeout. Critical_failure, master_sync_lost. The system wasn't buggy. It was fundamentally broken. I packed my bag and walked out into the cool night air. We had less than 24 hours until 2,000 people would be sitting in those seats, and I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that we were about to witness a public execution. The morning of the show felt like the calm before an artillery barrage. The air in the venue was thick with a quiet, desperate tension. Everyone was moving slowly, deliberately, like they were afraid a sudden movement might break whatever fragile connections were still holding the system together. Ramona and Brady arrived early, both looking like they hadn't slept. She was dressed in a sharp, expensive-looking black pantsuit, a commander trying to project authority even as her ship was taking on water. She gathered the team for a pep talk. It was more of the same hollow corporate cheerleading from the day before. She spoke about synergy and rising to the challenge. She said the dress rehearsal failures were a blessing in disguise, a final stress test that had made them stronger. Nobody believed her. The techs just stared at the floor, nodding numbly. They just wanted this to be over. Brady stood beside her, trying to look supportive, but he just looked haunted. Throughout the morning, small things kept breaking. A lighting rig would go offline. The audio feed to the press box would suddenly die. Each time, a small team would scramble to patch it, a frantic, whispered effort to put a finger in another hole in the dam. Ramona flitted between these small crises, her voice getting tighter and higher with each new problem. She wasn't managing the problems. She was managing the perception of the problems. She'd rush over, speak in hushed, urgent tones, and then walk away as if everything was under control. I stayed out of it. I did a final check of all my own gear, the power distribution, the hardline comms, the emergency lighting, the things that didn't rely on the cloud. Everything was solid, my little island of reliability in an ocean of chaos. About an hour before doors opened, I was standing on the catwalk overlooking the stage, just watching the quiet activity below. Ramona came up. I think she was looking for a quiet place to collect her thoughts. She seemed startled to see me. "Logan," she said, her voice softer than usual. "Everything okay up here?" "Everything up here is fine," I said, patting the metal railing. "Rock solid." She looked out over the empty seats. "It's going to be a great show, you know." It sounded like she was trying to convince herself more than me. I didn't respond. She turned to me. "Look, I know we've had some creative differences on this project." "We had a technical difference," I corrected her gently. "Not a creative one." Her eyes hardened a little. "This is what progress looks like. It's messy sometimes. You can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs." "You're right," I said. "But you should probably make sure you have a working stove before you start cracking." That was the wrong thing to say. The mask of calm cracked. "You know, Your problem is that you're afraid of the future, she snapped. You're so stuck in your old ways, with your cables and your black boxes. That kind of toxic masculine need for control is what holds progress back. You can't just trust the system to work. I can, I said, my voice still quiet, when it's a system I built to not fail. I think she wanted to say more, but her headset crackled. Another fire to put out. She just gave me a look of pure disgust and walked away. That was the last time we spoke before the show. The doors opened, the guests started to file in. The energy in the room shifted, the low hum of 1,000 quiet conversations, the flashes of cameras. I was at a small monitoring station backstage, my official job being to watch the main power draw. I had a perfect view of Ramona and Brady at the main control hub. Julio appeared, seemingly out of nowhere, and stood silently in the shadows a few feet behind them. He didn't say a word, just watched. The house lights dimmed, a hush fell over the crowd. The CEO of the car company walked onto the stage to a round of applause. He gave his speech. It was all about the future, about innovation, about breaking free from the past. The irony was so thick I could almost taste it. I watched Ramona at the console. She was taking deep breaths. Her knuckles were white where she gripped the edge of the desk. Brady was sweating, constantly wiping his forehead with a handkerchief. The CEO reached the end of his speech. He was beaming, full of pride. And now, it is with immense pleasure that I introduce you to the future of transportation, he declared. Ladies and gentlemen, behold the Odyssey. He dramatically pressed a large, glowing button on the lectern. This was the cue. The big moment. And for one beautiful, heart-stopping second, it worked. The music surged from the speakers. The entire stage exploded in a synchronized dance of light. The holographic car began to form in the center of the stage, shimmering into existence. I heard Ramona let out a small gasp of relief. Then, silence. It wasn't a slow failure. It was instant. Like someone had just unplugged the entire show. The music cut out. The lights snapped off, plunging the stage into near darkness, lit only by the emergency exit signs. The hologram vanished. On the hundreds of LED screens that made up the backdrop, a single, horrifying image appeared. A small, pixelated icon of a cloud with a red line through it. The universal symbol for no connection. A collective gasp went through the audience. The CEO stood on stage, blinking in the dim light, his triumphant smile frozen on his face. The silence stretched on. 1 second, 2, 5, an eternity. Then, from somewhere in the crowd, a single person laughed. It was a short, sharp bark of a laugh, but it shattered the silence. It was followed by a wave of murmurs, people whispering to each other. I looked at the main control station. Ramona was just staring at her monitor, her face completely blank with shock. The screen was filled with a single, simple error message in a plain white box. Connection to master server lost. Brady looked like he was going to be sick. He was fumbling with his headset, muttering, "No, no, no." The CEO, to his credit, tried to recover. He tapped the microphone. "A little technical gremlin, folks, just bear with us." But the damage was done. The magic was gone. The stage manager's voice came over the comms, a frantic whisper. "Get him off stage! Get him off!" Someone quickly escorted the CEO off the stage as the house lights slowly, manually, came back on. The show was over. Backstage was controlled chaos. Ramona was just frozen, staring at the error message. She wasn't speaking. She wasn't moving. Brady was having a full-blown meltdown, hyperventilating into a paper bag one of the interns gave him. The client representatives, the ones who had left the rehearsal the day before, were there. Their faces were furious. They were shouting at our company's account executive, who looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. Through all this, Julio was an island of pure, cold calm. He let the initial wave of panic wash over everyone. Then he spoke, and his voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the noise like a razor. In the small briefing room, now, he pointed at Ramona, Brady, me, and the senior engineer. The briefing room was a small, windowless box. The mood was funereal. Ramona and Brady sat at one end of the table. Ramona looked like a ghost. Brady was still trembling. I stood against the far wall, with the senior engineer next to me. Julio closed the door, and the silence was deafening. He didn't sit down. He just stood at the head of the table and looked at Ramona. He let the silence hang for a good 30 seconds. "Explain," he said finally. "It wasn't a request. It was a command." Ramona opened her mouth, but only a small croak came out. She cleared her throat. It was the venue's internet," she stammered. "It must have dropped. A total provider failure. It wasn't our fault." Julio's expression didn't change. He turned his head slightly towards the senior engineer. "Report." The engineer, a good man I'd worked with for years, didn't look at Ramona. He looked straight at Julio. "The venue's internet connection is, and was, perfectly stable," he said, his voice flat and factual. "I have the logs. The failure was with the SyncNova platform. Their server stopped responding. According to their own status page, which just updated 5 minutes ago, they had a catastrophic hardware failure at their main data center." He slid a tablet across the table. On the screen was the SyncNova status page with a big red banner, "Global Outage." Julio looked at the tablet, then back at Ramona. "So, the innovative cloud system, the one you chose against the advice of your senior technical coordinator, had a single point of failure, and it failed." Ramona shrunk in her chair. She had nothing left, no excuses, no buzzwords. I thought the risk was minimal," she whispered. "You didn't think," Julio said, his voice dangerously low. You gambled the company's biggest ever contract on a startup because it looked good on a slide. You ignored the expert advice of the man who has successfully executed every complex project this company has had for the last 10 years. The room was silent again. Brady looked like he was trying to merge with his chair. Then, Julio's eyes turned to me. It felt like the whole world slowed down. "Logan," he said, his voice now calm and steady. "I was told you had a contingency plan." Every head in the room turned to me. Ramona's eyes widened. She looked at me with a mixture of disbelief and a tiny, desperate flicker of hope. I stood up straight, pulling my shoulders back. I wasn't angry. I wasn't gloating. I just felt calm, vindicated. "Yes," I said, my voice clear and strong in the small room. "I did. The Cerberus control system is on site, racked and ready." I looked directly at Julio, ignoring everyone else. "It's fully programmed with the show's cues. It's self-contained and runs on its own power. It would have executed the show flawlessly." "How long would it take to get it running?" Julio asked. "To get it running, 10 minutes, I said. To integrate it fully with their stage setup now, an hour. The show could have gone on." No one said anything. The weight of that last sentence, "the show could have gone on," hung in the air, an indictment of the entire fiasco. Ramona finally broke. She put her face in her hands and started to quietly sob. Julio looked at her for a moment, not with pity, but with a kind of weary finality. He then looked at me. "Thank you, Logan. That's all I needed to know." He turned and walked out of the room. A week later, got an email from HR. Ramona had decided to pursue other opportunities. Her farewell message to the team was a long, rambling essay about the challenges of being a woman in a legacy-dominated industry and the importance of failing forward. No one replied. Brady is still here. He's been reassigned. He's now in charge of managing the inventory of our extension cords. He doesn't make eye contact with me. The Monday after the event, Julio called me into his office, the big corner one I'd never been in before. He didn't waste time with small talk. He pushed a single piece of paper across his desk towards me. It was an offer letter. He'd created a new position, Director of Technical Operations. It came with a significant pay raise and complete authority over the technical execution of all future projects. I read it, then looked at him. He just leaned back in his chair. "I need people who prevent fires," he said, "not people who are good at writing reports about them afterwards." I signed the paper. We shook hands. Now I'm back at my desk. It's a bigger desk. My first official act was to sign the purchase order for a second Cerberus unit, a backup for the backup. Things are quiet. The work is hard, but it makes sense again. The job isn't about looking good, it's about being good, and for the first time in a long time, that feels like enough.